Elena Carter had built her life around rules and fairness. Every day she wore her black robe with pride, feeling the weight of her responsibilities on her shoulders. She had worked hard to become a judge, and every decision she made was a reflection of years of dedication. Yet, despite her calm and collected exterior, life had a way of testing even the most disciplined people. Today, as she sat in her office, leafing through the day's cases, she felt a strange mix of anticipation and unease. There was one case that seemed ordinary at first glance, but when she read the name, her heart skipped a beat. Ryan Summers. The name brought back a flood of memories she had thought were buried long ago. Ryan had been her first love, the boy who had made her heart race in ways she had never experienced again. They had been inseparable in high school, sharing dreams and secrets, making promises they thought would last forever. And then, as suddenly as he had appeared in her life, he had vanished, leaving her confused and heartbroken. Elena had spent years moving on, convincing herself that she had left the past behind. And now, seeing his name on a legal document, all those feelings returned with full force. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. Memories of Ryan's laugh, his mischievous smile, the way he had looked at her with so much hope and affection, filled her mind. She could almost hear his voice, light and teasing, whispering promises that now seemed like distant echoes. Elena shook her head, trying to focus on the present. She was a judge, and her personal feelings could not interfere with her work. The law demanded impartiality, and she had always taken that principle seriously. Still, she couldn't deny the emotions that had resurfaced. She remembered the last time she had seen him, the day he left town without explanation. She had waited for a letter, a phone call, any sign that he cared, but nothing came. The pain had been sharp, and at the time, she had been too young to understand why people sometimes walked away from the ones they loved. Over the years, she had built a strong life, focusing on her career and her sense of justice, but a small part of her heart had always remained tied to Ryan Summers. As she looked at the case file, she saw the details of his charges. Financial fraud, reckless decisions, actions that had hurt many people. Elena's mind was torn. On one hand, she had a duty to uphold the law. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the boy she had once loved, now standing on the other side of the courtroom as an accused man. She wondered how much of the story was true, and how much had been exaggerated by circumstances. She knew the law could be harsh, but it could also be just and compassionate if applied with wisdom. Elena spent the morning reviewing the documents, making notes, and preparing herself for the trial. Each line of the report reminded her that this was not just a man before her. It was the boy who had once held her heart. She forced herself to focus on the facts, analyzing each piece of evidence, questioning each witness statement, and considering the legal precedents. She reminded herself repeatedly that justice had no room for personal feelings, no room for nostalgia, no room for heartbreak. Even as she worked, her mind wandered to the past. She remembered the late nights they had spent talking about dreams, plans, and fears. Ryan had been adventurous, curious about the world, always eager to try new things. He had a way of seeing life with wonder, of making even ordinary moments feel magical. Elena had been drawn to his energy, his optimism, his unshakable belief that anything was possible. Together, they had believed in the future, in a life filled with love and happiness. And then it had all ended abruptly, leaving her with memories and unanswered questions. By midday, Elena decided to step outside for a brief walk. The courthouse gardens were quiet, the autumn leaves falling gently to the ground. She breathed in the crisp air, hoping it would clear her mind. But with every step, the memories grew stronger. She remembered Ryan's laughter echoing through the halls of their high school, the way he had held her hand during exams, and the promises he had whispered under the stars. She remembered the night before he left, how they had sat together in silence, neither of them knowing what the future held. That memory brought a pang of sadness that made her chest ache. Elena knew she had to confront her feelings. She had to separate the past from the present, the boy from the man, the memories from reality. She had to prepare herself to face Ryan in the courtroom, to hear his side of the story, to see the man he had become. It would not be easy. Her heart still remembered the love, the pain, the joy, and the heartbreak. But she was a judge, and she could not let her emotions dictate the outcome of a trial. Back in her office, she opened the case file again. She studied Ryan's past, his education, his career, and the circumstances that had led him to this point. She noted patterns, mistakes, and the influences that had shaped his decisions. She wondered what had driven him away all those years ago, what had changed him, and what had remained the same. She realized that people were not defined by a single mistake, that life was complex and that redemption was possible. Yet she also knew that accountability was essential, that actions had consequences, and that justice could not be compromised. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, Elena felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. The trial would not just be a legal matter, it would be personal, emotional, and transformative. She had spent years perfecting her ability to remain impartial, but this case would test her in ways she had never imagined. She would have to navigate a delicate balance between the law, her conscience, and the remnants of a love that had never truly faded. In the quiet moments before the trial, Elena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She reminded herself of her oath, of the responsibility she carried, and of the importance of fairness. She acknowledged the flood of memories, the emotions that had resurfaced, and the vulnerability she felt. She understood that facing Ryan would be challenging, but she also sensed that it could be an opportunity for closure, for understanding, and perhaps for a new beginning, even if it was only in the form of mutual respect and honesty. Elena returned to her desk, determined to approach the trial with clarity and integrity. She reviewed her notes, organized the evidence, and mentally prepared for the courtroom. She imagined the moment when she would see Ryan again, the moment when past and present would collide. She felt a nervous anticipation, a mix of fear and hope and a quiet determination to do what was right, no matter how difficult it might be. As evening approached, the courthouse grew still. Elena looked out the window at the fading light, reflecting on the twists of fate that had brought her here. Life had a way of challenging people, of forcing them to confront the past, of testing their strength and character. She realized that this case was more than a legal matter. It was a journey into her own heart, a test of her ability to balance love, justice, and compassion. With a final glance at the case file, Elena set it aside and leaned back in her chair. She felt a quiet resolve, a readiness to face whatever came next. Ryan Summers would stand before her in the courtroom, not as the boy she had loved, but as a man who had made mistakes and sought redemption. And she, as a judge, would have to navigate the delicate path between justice and empathy, between the past and the present, and between the heart and the law. As night fell, Elena left her office, the courthouse empty and silent around her. She walked through the halls with measured steps, feeling the weight of responsibility and the stirrings of long-forgotten emotions. She knew that the trial would be challenging, that it would bring both pain and insight, and that it would leave a lasting impact on both their lives. Yet she also felt a sense of readiness, a quiet strength and an understanding that the past, no matter how painful, could inform the present and guide the future. The morning of the trial arrived, and Elena Carter felt a strange mix of nerves and anticipation. She had spent hours preparing, reviewing every document, every piece of evidence, and every detail of the charges against Ryan Summers. Yet beneath her calm exterior, her mind was a whirlwind of memories and emotions. She tried to focus on the present, on the duty she had sworn to uphold, but the past refused to stay buried. Elena remembered Ryan as if it were yesterday. The way he used to stand at her locker in the mornings, the quick smiles, the teasing jokes, the shy glances. He had been adventurous, always encouraging her to dream bigger, to take chances. He had been her world when they were together, and she had loved him with a depth she had never allowed herself to feel again. And now, years later, he was on the other side of the courtroom facing charges that could ruin his life. Meanwhile, Ryan Summers was awake early, restless and uneasy. He had always known life could be unpredictable, but he had never imagined it would bring him here, facing the judge who had once held his heart. He had spent the night replaying memories of Elena, of the life they had almost shared, her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams, the way she had believed in him even when he doubted himself. He felt both regret and fear, regret for the choices that had led him here, and fear of seeing her after so many years. Ryan arrived at the courthouse and paused for a moment outside the building, taking a deep breath. He felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Inside, he could see the familiar layout, the polished floors, the high ceilings, the sense of order that came with the law. He tried to steady his nerves, reminding himself that he had to face the consequences of his actions, that there was no running from responsibility. But his heart was racing, knowing that the judge would soon look at him with those eyes he had once known so well. The courtroom slowly filled with people. Lawyers spoke quietly to their clients, court officers prepared documents, and spectators found their seats. Elena entered the room with her usual poise, her robe flowing behind her, her face calm but alert. She walked to the bench and took her seat, feeling the familiar weight of authority. Yet as she looked across the room and saw Ryan standing there, a man shaped by mistakes and regrets, she felt a jolt of recognition, a rush of memories that made her stomach tighten. The trial began with the opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the charges against Ryan, speaking of fraud, deception, and the harm caused to innocent people. The words hit Elena hard, but she reminded herself to focus, to listen carefully, and to ensure a fair trial. The defense lawyer spoke next, portraying Ryan as a man who had made mistakes but was willing to take responsibility and make amends. Elena watched Ryan closely, seeing the tension in his shoulders, the nervous flicker of his eyes, the way he seemed smaller under the weight of the accusations. As the witnesses were called, Elena felt a mixture of empathy and duty. She heard stories of lost savings, broken trust, and financial damage. She listened to Ryan's colleagues, friends, and former clients describe the impact of his choices. She noted the remorse in Ryan's demeanor, the quiet apologies, and the attempts to explain his actions. She realized that people were not simply good or bad. They were complex, capable of mistakes and redemption. Her heart struggled to reconcile the boy she had loved with the man who now faced judgment. Between sessions, Elena allowed herself a few moments to reflect. She walked through the empty halls of the courthouse, remembering the time she had spent dreaming about the future with Ryan. She recalled their secret meetings in the park, their whispered promises, and the joy of simply being together. She remembered the pain of his sudden departure, the confusion and heartbreak, and the long nights of wondering why he had left. Those memories were a stark contrast to the present, where the boy she had loved was now a man in need of justice and mercy. Ryan, too, found moments of reflection. In the small breaks between court proceedings, he sat quietly, thinking about how his life had changed. He thought about the choices he had made, the opportunities he had missed, and the person he had become. He wondered if Elena would see him the way he had hoped, as someone capable of growth and change. He knew he had to face the consequences, but he also longed for a chance to show that he had learned from his mistakes. During one of the sessions, Elena observed Ryan's interactions with his lawyer. He was attentive, respectful, and genuinely concerned about making amends. She noticed how he listened carefully, how he nodded thoughtfully, and how he sometimes looked down, lost in thought. It was clear to her that he carried the weight of his actions, that he was not dismissive or arrogant, but sincere and human. That recognition did not cloud her judgment, but it added a layer of complexity to her decision-making. She had to balance the law with compassion, justice with understanding. The trial also brought unexpected revelations. Evidence emerged that some of the financial problems were due to circumstances beyond Ryan's control, moments of poor guidance, and lapses in judgment rather than intentional harm. Witnesses spoke of his efforts to make amends, to return money, and to help those affected. Elena considered these details carefully, noting the difference between willful wrongdoing and human error. She felt a sense of hope that Ryan could still find a path to redemption. Elena's thoughts often drifted back to their past. She remembered the day they had shared their first kiss, the thrill and innocence of young love. She recalled the summer evenings spent talking about the future, dreaming of careers, families, and adventures together. She remembered the laughter, the shared secrets, and the comfort of simply being in each other's presence. Those memories were bittersweet, filled with joy and pain, and they reminded her of the person she had once been and the person she had become. Ryan, too, carried memories that had never faded. He remembered the kindness in Elena's eyes, the way she believed in him even when he doubted himself, and the warmth of her hand in his. He remembered the plans they had made, the dreams they had shared, and the promise of a life together that had been interrupted by circumstances beyond their control. He felt regret for the pain he had caused, not only to others but to her, and he hoped that facing the trial would be a step toward making amends. As the day drew to a close, Elena felt a sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. She had spent hours listening, analyzing, and weighing the evidence, but she had also spent hours confronting her own feelings. She understood that this trial was not just about legal matters but about human lives, emotions, and the possibility of growth and change. She knew that the coming days would bring more challenges, more revelations, and more opportunities to test her ability to balance fairness with empathy. Ryan left the courtroom for the evening, walking through the empty streets with a heavy heart. He reflected on the trial, on the memories, and on the judge who had once been the center of his world. He knew that the days ahead would be difficult, but he also felt a quiet determination to face them honestly, to take responsibility, and to seek a chance at redemption. He understood that this was not just about the law, but about the person he wanted to become. Elena returned to her chambers, reviewing notes and preparing for the next day. She thought about the delicate balance she had to maintain, the challenge of remaining impartial while recognizing the humanity of the man before her. She reflected on the memories that had resurfaced, the emotions that had been stirred, and the lessons she had learned about forgiveness, growth, and understanding. She knew that the trial would be a turning point, not only for Ryan but for herself as well. As night fell, Elena sat quietly, considering the journey that lay ahead. She understood that the coming days would test her resolve, her judgment, and her heart. She knew that facing Ryan would bring both pain and insight, and that the outcome would have a lasting impact on both their lives. Yet she also felt a sense of readiness, a quiet strength, and an understanding that the past, no matter how complicated, could inform the present and guide the future. The stage was set for a trial that was as much about justice as it was about reconciliation, understanding, and the complexities of the human heart. Elena Carter and Ryan Summers were about to face a collision of past and present, a test of morality and emotion, and a journey that would transform them both in ways they could not yet imagine. The memories of first love, the mistakes of youth, and the demands of the law would all converge, creating a story of challenge, growth, and the enduring power of human connection. The trial continued, and each day brought new challenges for Elena Carter. She entered the courtroom with a sense of purpose, determined to remain fair and impartial. Yet, every time she saw Ryan Summers sitting at the defendant's table, she felt a tug at her heart, a reminder of the boy she had once loved. The courtroom was filled with tension, the air heavy with anticipation, and Elena knew that this trial was about more than just legal proceedings. It was about human lives, mistakes, and the possibility of redemption. Ryan listened intently as witnesses were called. Some spoke of financial losses, broken trust, and the pain caused by his decisions. Others testified about the small acts of kindness and attempts to make things right. Elena observed carefully, noting the sincerity in his gestures, the remorse in his eyes, and the quiet dignity with which he faced the consequences. She could see that he was not a man who had taken the path of wrongdoing lightly. He carried the weight of his mistakes with a seriousness that spoke to his character. The defense worked diligently, presenting evidence that explained Ryan's actions as misjudgments rather than intentional harm. They highlighted his efforts to repay debts, apologize to those affected, and seek guidance to correct his mistakes. Elena considered each point thoughtfully, weighing the facts against the law, the evidence against the human element. She understood that people were complex, capable of both error and growth, and that justice required more than punishment alone. During breaks, Elena often retreated to her chambers to gather her thoughts. She reflected on her past with Ryan, the memories of their youth, and the love that had once seemed unbreakable. She recalled the laughter, the dreams, the shared secrets, and the warmth of his presence. She remembered the day he left town, the silence that followed, and the heartache that had shaped her life. Those memories were painful, yet they reminded her of the human side of the trial, the emotions behind the legal proceedings, and the importance of empathy and judgment. Ryan, too, faced his own reflections. In the quiet moments of the trial, he thought about the choices that had brought him here. He remembered the excitement of youth, the impulsiveness of his decisions and the consequences he had not anticipated. He felt regret, not only for the harm caused to others but for the pain he had caused Elena, for the broken promises and the love left behind. Yet he also felt determination, a resolve to face the consequences honestly, to demonstrate growth, and to seek a path toward redemption. The courtroom became a stage for subtle interactions between the past and present. Elena noticed small gestures from Ryan, the way he nodded respectfully to witnesses, the careful attention he paid to his lawyer's advice, and the quiet moments of reflection he allowed himself. She observed the humanity in his actions, the effort to make amends, and the sincerity of his remorse. These observations did not diminish her sense of justice, but added layers of complexity to her decision-making. As the trial progressed, the prosecution introduced witnesses who spoke about the broader impact of Ryan's actions. They detailed the stress, financial strain, and emotional toll on those affected. Elena listened attentively, her sense of duty sharpening. She understood that accountability was essential, and that the law must protect society. Yet she also sensed that punishment alone would not address the full story, that understanding and compassion had a place in judgment, and that the man before her was more than his mistakes. Ryan's defense team worked tirelessly to present a fuller picture of his character. They called friends, colleagues, and mentors who spoke about his integrity, his willingness to learn from errors, and his efforts to rebuild trust. They described him as a man who had made mistakes but was committed to personal growth and restitution. Elena weighed these testimonies carefully, recognizing the importance of considering both the negative and positive aspects of his actions. Justice required balance, and she was determined to find it. Throughout the trial, Elena's thoughts often returned to the personal history she shared with Ryan. She remembered the summer evenings when they had walked through parks, dreaming of futures together. She remembered the quiet moments of connection, the warmth of his hand and the comfort of his presence. She remembered the heartbreak of his departure, the unanswered questions and the longing that had lingered for years. Those memories made the trial more challenging, but they also reminded her of the human element behind every case, the emotions that could not be quantified or dismissed. Ryan, too, carried memories that shaped his actions and reflections. He remembered the encouragement Elena had given him, the belief she had shown in his potential, and the warmth of their shared moments. He thought about how her absence had affected him, how it had influenced his decisions, and how he had struggled to find direction. He felt both regret and gratitude, recognizing that the experiences of the past had molded him into the person he was facing today, standing accountable for his choices. As the trial moved forward, Elena became increasingly aware of the delicate balance she had to maintain. She had to separate the boy she had loved from the man before her, the memories from the present reality, and her emotions from her duty. She understood that impartiality was not the absence of empathy, but the ability to apply fairness while recognizing humanity. She had to ensure that justice was served, that the law was upheld, and that her own feelings did not cloud the truth. The courtroom also revealed moments of vulnerability. Ryan occasionally faltered under questioning, his voice shaking as he recounted mistakes and misjudgments. Elena observed closely, noting the sincerity of his admissions, the remorse that seemed genuine, and the effort to face accountability. She felt a mixture of compassion and resolve, understanding that human beings were capable of error, learning, and growth. This awareness did not make her judgment easier, but made it more nuanced, requiring careful consideration and thought. During a particularly tense session, a key witness described the emotional impact of Ryan's actions on a family affected by financial loss. Elena listened attentively, feeling the weight of the words, the pain in the witness's voice, and the real consequences of his mistakes. She acknowledged the necessity of justice, the responsibility of the court, and the importance of protecting those harmed. At the same time, she recognized the potential for redemption, the opportunity for Ryan to make amends, and the role of compassion in shaping a fair verdict. Ryan's defense presented a turning point when a former mentor spoke about his genuine remorse, his efforts to repair relationships, and his commitment to personal growth. The testimony highlighted the complexity of human behavior, the capacity for change, and the potential for learning from mistakes. Elena considered these insights carefully, understanding that justice was not solely about punishment but about restoring balance and promoting responsibility. The human element was undeniable, and she was determined to honor it in her decision-making. Between sessions, Elena often found herself reflecting on life, choices, and the passage of time. She thought about how people grew, how mistakes shaped character, and how the past could inform the present. She considered the power of forgiveness, the importance of accountability, and the delicate balance required to administer justice fairly. She understood that the trial was as much a journey of understanding as it was a legal process, a test of character for both the defendant and herself. Ryan, meanwhile, felt a growing sense of clarity. He realized that facing the trial was not only about legal consequences, but about confronting his own past, acknowledging mistakes, and taking steps toward personal growth. He reflected on the years of longing, regret, and learning, and he resolved to approach each moment with honesty and integrity. He understood that redemption was possible, but it required effort, humility, and a willingness to face truth without excuses. As the day ended, Elena reviewed her notes, reflecting on the proceedings and the human stories that had unfolded. She recognized the complexity of the case, the importance of weighing evidence, and the necessity of balancing law and empathy. She understood that her role was not just to judge, but to ensure fairness, to acknowledge human fallibility, and to craft a decision that respected both justice and humanity. Ryan left the courtroom with a sense of reflection and quiet determination. He knew that the days ahead would be challenging, that he would have to face the verdict, and that he would need to continue demonstrating responsibility and growth. Yet, he also felt a renewed sense of purpose, a recognition of the opportunity to rebuild trust, and a hope that his efforts would be acknowledged with fairness and understanding. Elena returned to her chambers, thoughtful and introspective. She knew that the trial was approaching a critical stage, that the evidence had been thoroughly presented, and that the verdict would soon be within reach. She reflected on the journey so far, the past that had resurfaced, the emotions stirred, the human stories witnessed, and the lessons learned. She understood that the coming decision would not only affect Ryan, but also shape her own understanding of justice, compassion, and the human heart. As night fell, both Elena and Ryan faced the weight of anticipation. Each carried memories, regrets, hopes, and determination. The trial had become more than a legal process. It was a journey of reflection, growth, and confrontation with. The courtroom was quiet that morning, the kind of silence that felt heavy with anticipation. Elena Carter took her seat on the bench, her hands resting calmly before her, but inside she felt a storm of emotions. Today would be a day of revelation, a day where truths long hidden could no longer be ignored. She had spent weeks preparing, listening to testimonies, analyzing evidence, and wrestling with her feelings. And now, the time had come for her to weigh everything carefully, to consider justice and humanity together. Ryan Summers sat at the defendant's table, his posture tense, his eyes occasionally flicking toward the judge. He had spent the night reflecting, wondering how Elena would see him now. Would she recognize the boy she had loved in the man before her? Could she separate past feelings from the reality of the situation? Ryan felt a mixture of fear, hope, and deep regret. He understood the seriousness of the charges, but also believed that truth, honesty, and genuine remorse could influence the outcome. As the session began, the final pieces of evidence were presented. Elena listened intently, her mind carefully sorting through the facts. Witnesses spoke of Ryan's efforts to correct his mistakes, detailing the hours he had spent reimbursing those affected, the letters of apology he had written, and the personal sacrifices he had made to restore trust. Each testimony painted a picture of a man trying to rebuild his life, attempting to reconcile with his past errors. Elena noted every word, weighing the human element against the demands of the law. During a break, Ryan's lawyer handed him a folded letter. It had been written years ago, never sent, never shared. With a trembling hand, Ryan unfolded the paper. It was addressed to Elena, filled with words of apology, love, and longing. He had been too young, too afraid to express his feelings at the time, and now the words held a weight he could barely carry. Ryan thought of how different things might have been if circumstances had allowed them to stay together. He realized the letter could not change the past, but it could show Elena the sincerity of his heart. When the courtroom reconvened, Elena was presented with the letter by Ryan's lawyer, who explained its context. Elena read the words carefully, her heart tightening as memories of their youth resurfaced. The emotions of the past mingled with the responsibilities of the present, and she felt the delicate balance she had been striving to maintain. The letter revealed a man who had carried regret for years, a man who had reflected deeply on his choices, and a man who was willing to face the consequences honestly. Elena understood that this was not merely a plea for leniency, but a testament to growth and reflection. As she looked at Ryan, she saw more than the defendant. She saw a human being shaped by experiences, by mistakes, by love, and by loss. Her mind considered every testimony, every piece of evidence, every word of the letter. She remembered the boy she had loved, the laughter, the shared dreams, the moments of connection, and the heartbreak of his departure. She understood that while the past could not be changed, the present could offer understanding, fairness, and the chance for redemption. The court proceedings continued, and Elena allowed herself to observe Ryan closely. He was attentive, respectful, and composed despite the weight of the moment. She noticed the small gestures of sincerity, the way he listened to each question, the way he responded thoughtfully, the way he seemed to acknowledge the impact of his actions on others. It was a powerful reminder that justice was not only about the law but about understanding the human heart. Elena reflected on the nature of justice, on the responsibility of a judge to be both fair and compassionate. She remembered the teachings of her mentors, the principles she had studied, and the ethical standards she had upheld throughout her career. Yet this case challenged her in a deeply personal way. It was not enough to follow rules blindly. She had to recognize the humanity in the man before her, to weigh remorse against consequence, and to consider both accountability and growth. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Elena prepared to speak. Her voice was calm, measured, and authoritative, carrying the weight of experience and the clarity of thought. She acknowledged the mistakes Ryan had made, the harm caused, and the responsibility he must bear. She also recognized the genuine remorse he had shown, the efforts to make amends, and the growth he had demonstrated. The balance between justice and compassion was delicate, but she felt confident in her understanding of both law and humanity. Elena carefully explained her decision, outlining the reasoning behind it. She emphasized accountability, ensuring that Ryan understood the consequences of his actions and the importance of restitution. At the same time, she incorporated elements of rehabilitation, acknowledging the efforts he had made to correct his mistakes and the sincerity of his remorse. The verdict was structured to reflect both the demands of the law and the potential for personal growth, a decision that honored justice while recognizing humanity. As she spoke, Elena noticed Ryan's eyes glisten with emotion. He had expected judgment, punishment, and perhaps anger, but what he saw was a balance of firmness and understanding. He felt the weight of the moment, the gravity of the consequences, and the acknowledgement of his efforts to make things right. In that instant, both of them experienced a profound connection, a recognition that the past and present were intertwined, that mistakes could be confronted, and that growth was possible. The courtroom responded with quiet attentiveness. Witnesses, lawyers, and spectators understood that this was more than a legal decision. It was a testament to the power of honesty, remorse, and understanding. Elena had managed to convey the principles of justice while also highlighting the importance of empathy and human complexity. It was a moment of clarity, where law and compassion converged, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. After the session, Ryan remained seated, processing the verdict. He felt relief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose. The decision was not without consequence, but it was fair, just, and reflective of his journey. He realized that this moment marked a turning point, a chance to rebuild his life, to honor the lessons he had learned, and to move forward with integrity. He also felt a quiet sense of closure, knowing that Elena had seen him as more than his mistakes, as a human being capable of change. Elena returned to her chambers, reflecting on the day's events. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and introspection. The verdict had required careful thought, a balance of law and empathy, and the courage to confront personal emotions while maintaining professional responsibility. She understood that justice was not simply a matter of punishment, but a delicate process that considered the complexity of human behavior and the potential for growth. In the quiet moments that followed, Elena thought about the letter, the memories, and the journey that had brought them both to this point. She recognized that the past could not be changed, but the present offered opportunities for understanding, reconciliation, and insight. She realized that the trial had not only tested Ryan but had also challenged her, teaching lessons about compassion, fairness, and the enduring impact of human connections. Ryan, too, spent time reflecting on the verdict. He understood the gravity of the situation, the responsibilities he now carried, and the importance of living with integrity. He felt a renewed determination to honor the second chance he had been given, to continue making amends and to grow as a person. The experience had been humbling, enlightening, and transformative, reinforcing the understanding that mistakes, remorse, and effort could lead to meaningful change. The days that followed allowed both Elena and Ryan to process the profound impact of the trial. Elena recognized the strength it took to face past emotions, to weigh them against professional responsibilities, and to deliver a verdict that honored both law and humanity. She understood that the experience had deepened her understanding of justice, compassion, and the complexities of human relationships. It was a moment that would stay with her, shaping her perspective on the delicate balance between fairness and empathy. Ryan embraced the opportunity to rebuild his life with sincerity and dedication. He reflected on the journey that had brought him to the courtroom, the lessons he had learned, and the personal growth he had achieved. He realized that redemption was a process, requiring ongoing effort, humility, and a willingness to confront the past honestly. The verdict marked a new beginning, a chance to honor the lessons learned and to move forward with integrity. The courtroom had been a place of challenge, confrontation, and transformation. It had been a space where the past met the present, where mistakes were acknowledged, and where growth was recognized. For both Elena and Ryan, it had been a journey of reflection, understanding, and connection. The trial had tested their resilience, challenged their perceptions, and ultimately provided an opportunity for insight, closure, and transformation. As Elena left the courthouse that evening, she felt a sense of peace and resolve. The verdict had been delivered, justice had been served, and humanity had been honored. She reflected on the journey, the emotions, and the lessons learned, knowing that the experience would remain with her. The intersection of law, emotion, and human complexity had created a moment of profound significance, one that would shape their lives long after the courtroom doors had closed. Ryan walked alongside the